In this set of videos, we're going to be talking about all the different MIDI devices in Ableton Live and going through their functions and parameters. MIDI devices can only be used on MIDI tracks, and they can only be placed before MIDI instruments. Placing them prior to an instrument allows them to manipulate the MIDI information prior to going into that instrument. The first MIDI effect we've got in Ableton Live is the Arpeggiator. Let's place an operator instrument onto this MIDI track. We can then place the Arpeggiator device before it in the chain, so we can demonstrate how it works. I've also programmed some basic chords, so we can tweak the Arpeggiator's parameters and we can hear its effect on the output of these chords. The Arpeggiator device takes notes and plays them back sequentially, or one after the other. In this case, it's doing that with the chord. If only one note is played, it will just play this one individual note back in sequence. We can control the style and the speed of the sequence using the device's parameters. Firstly, we've got the style chooser. This drop-down box lets us decide how we want the device to play back the chord. This can be done in a number of ways. We can either go up and down, converge, diverge, con and diverge, pinky up, pinky down, and thumb up and thumb down. Now I'll just go through these so we can see how they sound. As well as these modes, we also have the chord trigger mode, which plays these notes as a chord. Here I've set up some MIDI routing, so you can see exactly what's going on with the output MIDI from this instrument because of the Arpeggiator. And we also have three different types of random mode. We have random, which is completely random. We've got random other, which will create a random sequence but won't repeat any given note until all the other notes have been used. And then we've got random once, which will create a random MIDI pattern and will repeat until a new set of notes are input into the device. I'm now going to flick through these different random modes so you can see and hear how they sound. So this first one is just random, which as you can see is completely random. Here we have random other. It's exactly the same as random, apart from it's not going to repeat any of the notes it's already played until it's played every single note on the input of the device. And finally we've got random once, which will repeat the same random pattern until further MIDI messages are put into the device. Then it will re-randomise the pattern. The speed at which these patterns are played back is defined by the rate control, which can either be set in tempo synced time or milliseconds. If we play one of our patterns again, I'll adjust the rate so you can see how this affects the output signal. The gate control alters the length of the notes, and this can drastically affect the rhythm of the arpeggio. If we push the gate parameter past 100%, we can effectively get the notes to overlap in a legato-like manner. We can use the groove drop-down menu to change the groove of our arpeggiated sequence. This can either be straight, or we can add some 8th, 16th or 32nd note swing to our groove. We can also control the intensity of our groove from the groove pool using the global groove parameter. The hold parameter can be used to latch the arpeggiator into the on position, which means you no longer have to hold down the keys on the keyboard. If you want the pattern to stop playing, just turn the hold function off momentarily. The offset parameter shifts the order that the notes play back in sequence. For example, if this is set to 1, then the pattern will shift by 1 note, meaning that the second note in the sequence will now be the first. If we set this to 2, then the third note will now become the first note in the sequence, and so on. You can think of this a bit like a circular loop brace, so with a setting of 1, the first note in the loop will now become the last note in the loop. The repeat parameter can be used to make the arpeggiator repeat a certain number of times before re-triggering. If this is set to infinite, then the pattern will carry on repeating indefinitely. The re-trigger function allows us to choose when the arpeggio gets re-triggered. This can either be turned off or set to note or beat. In note mode, the arpeggiator will re-trigger when a new note comes into the device. If we set this to beat, then we can specify a time in terms of notes and bars that the arpeggiator will re-trigger. The little LED light will indicate when it's being re-triggered. You can also transpose the arpeggiated notes. We can either do this in shift mode, which gives us a steps parameter, so we can shift the pattern in semitones, or we can change this to major or minor, which allows us to conform to a key. We can also control the decay time of the arpeggiator using the velocity section. With the velocity set to 1, we can now set a target velocity for the arpeggiator to reach. We can then set the decay time in seconds, which is the time that the arpeggiator will take to reach the target velocity. With the target set to 0, the arpeggiator will fade to silence with the given time set. With re-trigger selected, every time the arpeggiator is re-triggered, the decay ramp will start again. I'll now give a quick demonstration of the velocity settings in Arpeggiator so you can see them in action. Next, I'm going to show you how to use the Arpeggiator in a creative way to make unique drum rhythms. To do this, find yourself some percussion samples that work well together and in the same key, and load them into a drum rack. Now, if we go into clip view, we can draw these samples notes in as if they're a sustained chord. If we just play this normally without the arpeggiator, we're just going to get all of the bongo hits playing at once. But now if we turn on our arpeggiator and press play, we can tweak the rate, groove, gate and repeat sections so we can develop some brilliant percussive riffs that would have been really hard to program otherwise. To recap, in this session we've taken a look at the arpeggiator device, its different sequence modes and also transposing, re-triggering and velocity settings. We've also seen how we can use this for creative percussion as well as synths.